Welcome, everybody. I'm Dr. Michael Lyon, and with me today is Sandra Elia. Sandra is one of the only certified food addiction counselors in Canada, and she's gained quite a following amongst the public as well as amongst the medical professionals, dietitians, and others who work with people in a clinical setting where we're helping people referred by doctors primarily with serious weight problems. We're not talking about someone who just wants to get a six-pack abs for the summer, although, great, good for you.
Why not?
And you might work with some of those people, but with our patients, they're patients that have all been referred by their doctors. And so, for one thing, the people tend to be bigger, not always, because sometimes you can have diabetes at quite a low BMI. I'm 5 pounds away from type 2 diabetes right now.
Wow.
And my BMI is like 23 to 24.
Wow, couldn't get better. Yeah.
I've got all the wrong epigenetics. Born to a mom with diabetes. I was a very plump kid. I was actually the heaviest kid in Estevan, Saskatchewan, and was a punching bag until I learned karate. That was handy because I was picked on a lot as a kid, and learning karate was really handy. I got kids to respect me. Anyway, we go back quite a while, don't we?
Yeah, we were trying to figure out when we first met, and we met at an Obesity Canada Summit, a conference that brings professionals together to look at the science of obesity. And you took a chance on my program that I was running in the Wharton Medical Clinic here in Ontario for food addiction. Most often when I tell doctors about food addiction, they kind of go, what is that? Is that a thing? and I remember that was Dr. Sean Wharton's first impression. What is that? Is that even a thing? And
it's not a DSM-5 definition, right? Or diagnosis yet. And of course, we have binge eating disorder, which it's an eating disorder.
But
and there's definitely overlap. And you could say maybe a lot of people with binge eating disorder have a food addiction, but there's some very fundamental differences, aren't there? People ought to know that up front, probably. Like, to me, a food addiction is all about the food. Right? It's a habit. It starts probably like most addictions, starts as a habit, and then it becomes, you might call, a bad habit.
Yes.
And then then the part that is where you start losing control starts to come in, right?
Yeah.
Where there's something, it's almost like there's a force in you that says you're going to do this thing that you've done over and over. Maybe it's pizza in this case instead of cocaine. It's a better choice probably.
Yeah. And it starts, I think the hallmark is it starts to affect every single area of your life, right? So of course there's many people who are emotional eaters. There's the odd person who overindulges, and that's all fine. Food addiction usually looks like it's affecting my physical health, my mental health, my career, my relationships, my self-esteem, my self-worth. It's pervasive across an entire person's life, and they really carry a lot of shame because it's like, why can't I just get a handle on this? And it's often driven by pain, often driven by maybe childhood trauma, but sometimes not. I have a lot of parents who contact me about their teens who they feel are food addicts, who are living with severe obesity, and I believe that's more of a product of an incredibly toxic food environment that we feed our children little by little by little, and then suddenly some of them, it clicks into a full-blown addiction, no different than alcohol. Teens, I have a teen, they experiment with alcohol, and that's fine, and they never go over that hurdle of having alcoholism. For whatever reason, it just doesn't happen, and that's kind of the way it is with ultra-processed foods as well.
Sure. So to me, when we talk about food addiction, there's always that sense that should we put a label on this where in other addictions, the primary treatment is abstinence.
Yeah.
Well, abstinence is a big problem when it comes to food addiction because that's probably where you can say where binge eating disorder actually comes from, because binge eating disorder isn't that you're so much habitually eating a specific kind of food, which it can be, but it's more that it's more that there's, I guess, a sense of something inside of you is missing, like you very, very much like an eating disorder is often associated with a lot of self-hatred. Maybe there's expressions of like you just feel so terrible, and it's self-directed in many ways. Maybe because living in a harsh environment where you grow up and get yelled at a lot, or maybe you have a difference. Maybe you're not maybe you're a neurodivergent person.
Yeah.
A lot of these things ring some bells for me because I was, I was the, pretty bright, but very much ADHD and high functioning autistic geeky kid that, I was fine with having no friends because I loved my microscope when I was in grade one. And I had a great fossil collection, so
Wow.
that was okay. But at the same time, I lived a very solitary life. And that's a setup for a binge eating disorder because you learn that you don't fit in, and you learn that people maybe don't like you that much because you get together with someone to have a nice conversation, and they bring up a subject they're interested in, and pretty soon you do a data dump, and you're like Encyclopedia Britannica, and pretty soon it's like they say, and it still happens once in a while because my wife will say it's like being hit with a fire hose. Right?
Yes.
But that can create a sense that you don't really like yourself.
Yeah.
You don't like yourself, and so what do you do when you don't like something or somebody? You kind of want to hurt them.
Yeah.
In a sense,
exactly.
I hate to say it that way, but it's sort of, there's got deep roots to it, right? If you grew up, I grew up where my father was a very harsh man. That's a polite way of putting it. Yeah. So we lived in an environment where there was a lot of very, very harsh words spoken, and sometimes some physical things would happen. To my mother mostly, but to me sometimes, and and that's kind of a setup for a binge eating disorder, I think.
It's a setup for a lot.
I reflect back, I think I did have it while I was a kid. I had a habit. Tell me, what do you think? Is this a food addiction or a binge eating disorder?
Well,
I'll tell you my story.
Yes.
My mother had a catering company. We had like big, commercial fridges and freezers full of food. Downstairs we had a couple big freezers, and we had as many tubs of ice cream as you'd have in a typical ice cream shop. Because when she did a dinner, sometimes she'd put on an ice cream bar, and that was always in our freezer. So I had a hidden spoon under the under the freezer, and after I had too much to eat for dinner, I'd go down and I'd eat whatever choice of ice cream I had that day, and I'd eat until I just about fell over backwards. And then I felt disgusting, and I hated myself, I guess. I remember some strong feelings around that. And eventually I got a handle on that, and it was a tough battle out of that. And at 67, I have a very healthy relationship with food. I've made peace with ice cream. Primarily by making my own frozen yogurt, but
it's interesting the career you selected, right? You're an obesity doctor. You work in the space to heal others. So I think that your childhood story definitely mirrors mine. Actually, it's really interesting. Probably mirrors a lot of people that struggle with eating. And so I know that there's 3 things children need. They need to feel safe, they need to feel loved, and they need to feel special. And when that's not available, and food is readily available, as it was in your freezers, of course you're going to go there, because ice cream is going to give you hits of dopamine. It's going to give you hits of serotonin. You're going to feel ease and comfort and safety. So when the adults in our lives don't provide those for us, then we turn to food. And it is acceptable, available, and sometimes even parents just give it. And so I grew up very similar to you. My father was an angry man, a violent man. I witnessed domestic violence, so my sense of safety and security was robbed from me at a very young age. And my mother was Italian. So guess what? We had plenty of food, and more food, like unlimited food at all hours. And that was all she could really offer, because when I was born, she was living with severe obesity. She was living with bipolar disorder, and she was emotionally unavailable to me. So she made sure that we had enough food to feel loved. And then over time, as a young boy, you would go to the ice cream and soothe and find the comfort you needed. But then probably something happened, like a switch went over to, but now I need it, right? No different than if you had cocaine available in your house, and you would have little bits of cocaine to get you through a rough night, a little bit, and then one day you might be 16 and you feel safe and everything's okay, but now you gotta have it. You gotta have it. Doesn't matter what's happening in the house. And I wonder, if that's what happens with binge eating disorder. So one of the biggest distinctions, because I was diagnosed with binge eating disorder in my 20s, and the treatment is very different than the treatments that we would have for food addiction. So for food addiction, abstinence is maybe the preferred model, or harm reduction. But with binge eating disorder,
abstinence, we maybe should make sure people understand abstinence, because it's really, and it isn't forever necessarily, but abstinence from certain foods, things that maybe aren't even really properly classified as foods most of the time.
Exactly.
Highly processed foods is pretty well, people don't get addicted to broccoli, right?
No.
Maybe with cheese on it, I guess, but uncommon.
Uncommon. So I call them trigger foods. So these are foods that you obsess about. Once you start, hard to have a reasonable portion. And having a trigger food will often lead to an overeating episode with other trigger foods. And so for some food addicts, it's just easier to have them almost like red light foods. These are foods that I avoid, as opposed to trying to navigate. Maybe I can have them on the weekends, maybe just on special occasions, because navigating how to have them in moderation, they have a lifetime of evidence that shows that kind of blows up on them. And you're right, it's not forever, and abstinence doesn't work for everybody either.
I'm going to tell some of my secrets here, because I learned this early on, that you know how I got away from my ice cream addiction, because it was definitely an addiction. Maybe there was some binge eating disorder there, because it was a way to escape, right? But the thing about binge eating disorder that's very different is it's mostly about the abstinence period, like not eating anything. Fasting, people think that binge eating disorder should be solved by intermittent fasting. No, you're just trying to treat binge eating disorder with anorexia nervosa. It doesn't really work, right? They're both of them are unbalanced, disorderly ways of eating. So eating in an orderly way is important. And for me also, I had to find something to fill that. When I wanted ice cream, I decided I would have to find something that wouldn't hurt me, because ice cream hurt me every time. So, I love it. So we often talk about this, that what we're trying to heal in people is their relationship with food. We're not trying to tell them what's the magic diet. Maybe it is the carnivore diet. Probably not. That's a good way to die
Who
young,
knows
I think.
what it is? I have
probably
no
not
idea.
The carnivore diet, but maybe there's versions of the low carb keto diet that are healthy with a lot of vegetables and healthy protein sources and fats, and that I think that's quite reasonable potentially. But most of the time, it's not about the magic diet. It's about healing the relationship you have with food. And people love food, but food is hurting them. Food is hurting them.
You taught me this sentence: eat food that you love, that loves you back. That's the key. It's got to love you back. It's got to give you health and vitality and clarity of mind and energy. And if that food doesn't love you back, then it's bad news. And I love to say, I don't like to call foods good or bad. I don't believe in that. I'd rather ask my clients, is it peaceful? Is this food peaceful for you? Does it have a beginning? Does it have an end? Do you not spiral after it? Do you find that you can enjoy it, be in the moment, and then move on with your life in between meals?
The other thing I think is so important that people have sort of lost touch with is, how does it make you feel? Eat your meal and then reflect upon, how does it make you feel? Do you feel wonderful after that meal, like you've just been renewed by something? That's how you should feel. If you have a proper relationship with food, you should love food more, because maybe you have to learn how to cook some things that are tasty but are good for you a lot more than you do now, or whatever. You have to learn how to eat things that love you back.
That's right.
So you love food, but it loves you back. And so, if you eat a meal and you feel gross, did you eat too much? Did you eat too quickly? Did you eat the wrong thing? And if you clean those things up and then you finish a meal and you feel fully satisfied, because if you want to know the magic diet, it's a diet that fills you up without overeating. If you can do that, you got it solved, and that's called volumetric eating.
Yes, which is a great strategy for people, because some people, I had a doctor, maybe you know her, Dr. Angie Hong. She supervised my first food addiction recovery program at the Wharton Clinic, because Sean was very nervous. He's like, I don't know who this lady is, and I can't just put her onto my patient. So Angie sat with me, and she taught me one day to say, the purpose of eating is not to become full. And she had me change what I was saying to my daughter. I would always say, are you full? Are you full? No, the question is, are you satisfied?
Sure.
Right? It's
Sure.
very different
Yeah.
from, because that
Yeah.
full feeling. But I get it. Some people
And
are
it probably
afraid.
comes where you're about 80% full. So
Yeah.
when I go back to my childhood, the thing that helped me was starting to eat. We had a vegetable garden. That was one of the great things. And I learned to eat vegetables. It was on our dinner table every night. And so I got quite fond of eating vegetables, especially carrots. And after dinner, instead of going down for ice cream, I started to kind of force myself at first, but I would go and get a bunch of carrots and I'd sit down and distract myself maybe with TV for a while, and I'd get through 4 or 5 carrots.
Yeah.
Until my stomach was properly full after my dinner meal without overeating. So I ate the dinner meal. My mother was a gourmet cook, and we always had fairly sumptuous meals, and she loved to see me eat 2 or 3 helpings, but I decided I'm going to have 1 helping, and then I'm going to have my carrots.
Yeah.
And sometimes apples.
What you're demonstrating, so sometimes nighttime eating is a problem for almost everyone who struggles with compulsive eating, addictive eating. And so oftentimes they think the plan is, I got to stop. That's my plan. I got to stop. No, that's actually not a plan. What can you do to replace this habitual form of eating with something else, right? And I think you found it. It was carrots and it was apples and distraction. And maybe you don't do that anymore, and it got you over that hump for not to reach for ice cream after dinner. Would that be fair?
To me, I always have to have something volumetric in the evening. It's typically more like an apple, but I do have some fresh carrots still from my garden.
Yeah, nice. That's great.
So I have been eating some nice carrots from the garden.
Yeah.
It's, to me, it's a big deal that you have, like if you have this stomach that's been conditioned to be stuffed until you feel satisfied, you have to find a way of doing that to some extent in most of your meals without overeating. For me, that's just eat a lot of vegetables.
Exactly.
Eat a lot of vegetables. If you start learning how to eat a lot of vegetables, you can fill up every meal. For me, it's a dinner meal. It's if I don't have a full stomach with a dinner meal, I feel like I need to graze all evening long. Right. That's a hard one to overcome.
For sure. I agree with you. And for me, it's a tea ritual. There's something, and I start to actually almost get panicky about my tea. Like, I look forward to it, set the kettle, pick the tea, warm up the almond milk, put the cinnamon. It's a whole production for me, and that's my new ritual. And the tea helps to fill me up. But, I've been doing this for 12 years, and I wonder if you find this a similar. I feel that most of my work is undoing diet culture.
Yeah.
Because so many of us were raised during diet. I grew up in my teens in the 80s, where diet was dinner conversation. What's the latest diet, and what's the book, and this and maybe that. And I feel like I'm just trying to unprogram all of that, because your strategy sounds fantastic. But I know some of my clients would say, are you crazy? I can't eat past 7. That's going to be calorie. And so it's almost like they try to either eat in this restrictive diet way or a destructive way. And those were my only 2 ways of eating.
Yeah.
Perfect or destructive. I never had anything in between. I never tried to figure out what works for me. And I spent all my time telling people there is no perfect diet. Stop the search. How could it be when you have different activity levels, different ages, cultural preferences? There were so many times in the food addiction world where people would say I couldn't eat lentils, like crazy rules that made no sense, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like,
maybe it's a blood type diet or
and I'm like,
or the wheat belly diet guy who's trying to sell you like really big, very expensive supplements. That's what it's all about.
That's right.
They're trying to. A lot of the people that have like such strong opinions about their diet, it's because there's a vested interest there. Yeah. Some of it's that their ego is built around the idea that you should only eat meat or whatever it might be. I'll pick on that one because that's probably one that's going to go by the wayside soon enough, because these people will start. Well, they'll all start dropping like flies. Just there's some already in the hospital right now, and there's more to come. Yeah. These smug doctors that sit there and eat 32-ounce steaks in front of you while they're critiquing some study. Just watch. Their day will come.
So I was
it's not a healthy way to eat.
I was in Sardinia this summer. I took my daughter to Sardinia for 3 weeks, and we visited the Blue Zone. So for those of you who don't know what the Blue Zone is, there's 5 on Earth. So there's Greece, Japan, Sardinia, Costa Rica, and Lima, California. And it's where people live well into their 90s, into their hundreds with health and vitality. And there's some very common themes throughout. And none of them eat keto, just FYI. None of them. So,
No.
when I was in Sardinia, I noticed that it would be very hard to develop obesity in Sardinia. I was looking around and everybody was so fit and strong at every age and so slender, everybody. And I'm like, where have I landed?
They don't go to the gym.
No,
They never
no
go to the
gyms.
gym.
No Pelotons, no HIIT classes, nothing. And so a couple of things before we visited the Blue Zone, we were at the beach. So my daughter, after 2 weeks, she's like, please, can I have chicken nuggets? And I'm like, oh my God. Okay, look on the map. See what? It would have been a 3-hour round trip by car. I said, sorry, you're out of luck. You know what? When we go to the restaurant, they can fry you a chicken cutlet. I'm not driving 3 hours round trip. The other thing I noticed, even though we had a rental car, it was actually easier to walk everywhere because by the time I would find somewhere to park, you still had to go down 4 flights of stairs, up a flight, around a mountain, and then we eventually, I'm like, we're leaving the car. It's too hard to do that. And the sense of community everywhere we went, large tables of families, community, because I do believe connection is the opposite of addiction. So when we look at Sardinia Blue Zone, which was definitely a bucket list, if anyone ever goes, they make murals of people who make it past 100. So while you're walking through the village, you'll see Salvatore, who made it to 104, and then you'll go a little further, and there's one of Gilda, and she made it to 102, and I just loved it. So 65% of their diet is complex carbs.
Yeah.
So legumes, beans, they do eat pasta almost every day, but however, it is a different flour. It's not GMO. They don't, right? Cheese, another
portions. Portions are everything, right?
Yeah.
People just don't gorge. It's different when you eat food that's real food. One of the first things
rich.
if you consistently eat just real food, and fresh food that's you've been made from scratch, basically, it starts to enliven the natural appetite regulation systems that are in your body. Everybody knows the word GLP-1 now, or the letters. Years ago, when I was doing GLP-1 research, like 18 years ago, nobody heard of it before, back then. But now everybody knows GLP-1. But that comes from your gut.
Yes.
My research was what type of dietary fibers activate GLP-1, because there's cells that respond to the breakdown products of dietary fiber. That's where GLP-1 comes from. It comes from being stimulated by eating volumetric foods.
Yes.
And that's what they eat there. So they're people that probably have a natural appetite regulation system that's working well. And so they don't have to feel stuffed to feel full, to feel satisfied. In Japan, they call it herahachibu. Herahachibu. I'm sorry for my pronunciation, but it's essentially, that's the formal way of saying it. There's a Japanese wouldn't say it quite like that, but the formal way, herahachibu, means eat until you're 80% full or thereabouts. Eat until you can sense a satisfaction that isn't that your stomach is being completely stretched. Yes. It's that you feel like that's enough now. You're in communication with your body, essentially. Your body's telling you, I've had enough, that's good. I want to feel good after this meal is the principle. I have, and there's so many good principles in Japan that sort of help with the underpinnings of what we're talking about today. These people have a really healthy relationship with food. And I mean,
100%.
talking about people that live long, Okinawa, south, it's Japanese island, south of Japan, traditionally that's the people that have the longest lifespan of everybody on Earth.
Wow.
So they're the ones they're the record breakers. More people live into their 90s, totally flourishing, and into their over 100. But
and they
you know
have
what?
Sweet potato. They have their
80% of their calories came from sweet potato traditionally. So talk about, that we hear these people say we're all carbohydrate poisoned.
Yeah.
Well, we are in a sense of the junk food that people eat is a lot of processed carbs, but it doesn't mean we're all carbohydrate poisoned necessarily. If your diet was natural and 80% of your calories come from sweet potato, you have a chance to be amongst the people that live longer than anybody on Earth.
Exactly.
And that's true. Exactly. You can see that all around the world. You can see, and I did some work on in the prevention of diabetes, and I had a chance to speak at a conference on the Pima Reserve, which is part of Phoenix, Arizona now, but it's a big reserve, and it was part of a nation down there. The Pima people were a people that had agricultural practices going back about 800 years. Wow. They had turned the Gila River into irrigation canals, and they're the ones that developed a lot of the vegetables that we actually still have in the grocery store today, different varietals of squash, different kinds of corn. They were the ones that sort of, I think, took corn or took maize and started to make it more like corn. Maize is very green, mealy and not very digestible. Anyway, they had a very important agricultural practice. 80% of their calories came from carbohydrates, and they had no diabetes or obesity at all before the colonization occurred, and they were put on reserves and given flour, oil, and sugar, which is the common practice in Indian reserves, and why they make bannock and so on. That's all you can make out of it. In any case, the Pima people today have the highest risk of obesity and diabetes in the world. But when they didn't have any diabetes or obesity, their diet was 80% carbohydrates. Yeah. So that I've always brought that up at a lecture of someone that says, we all should be on if you have insulin resistance, you should be on the keto diet. Well, explain that, that the people with the highest risk of obesity in the world that never had any obesity or diabetes before, when their diet was 80% carbs, why do they have such the highest rate of obesity and diabetes in the world now? Yeah.
So I had the great honor of going to the United Nations Assembly in New York this past September because, as you know, I'm the chair of Obesity Matters, a nonprofit organization that empowers, educates, and advocates for people living with obesity. And we won an award for our work.
Awesome. Wow.
I know, it was such an honor. So before the award ceremony, we attended the Global Obesity Forum, and they had representatives from all over the globe. And they were very clear, and they pointed the finger of blame at ultra-processed foods. That everywhere ultra-processed foods are introduced, obesity rates skyrocket in areas where they have never seen obesity, because we always say there is a genetic component, but these are people who from the beginning of dawn have never had obesity, and we introduce our Western world, and most sadly, the children are quadrupling rates of obesity. And in fact, there's only 2 places left on earth where obesity rates are not rising: Sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia. Otherwise, everywhere else. And in North America, there's always a reluctance, because I go to the obesity conference, I go to 2 to 3 a year, and in North America, they're not talking about ultra-processed. It has nothing to do with obesity. We can't, I've even heard doctors say, we can't ask our patients not to eat that food. It's everywhere. So for me, that's the message I want to get out, because people say, well, how am I supposed to avoid these foods? First of all, don't look at them as foods. They're not food. They are a chemically engineered substance that's made in a factory that's nutrient poor and will cause diseases. Like, I even have moms saying, why should I deprive my children? I'm like, deprive your children of what? Chemicals that will make them very sick?
Yeah.
Right?
There's things that are edible, like you think there might be, say, a packaging, like it tastes like cardboard, but it's edible. Yeah. Okay, well, that's good. Well, you wouldn't necessarily eat that for dinner, but the problem is a lot of processed foods are basically, they're not really food. I mean, they give you calories. Yes. They may give you some nutrition. Most of them are not very high in protein. I guess you can get a protein bar that's basically a chocolate bar spiked with protein. Yeah. That's kind of a hideous monster in a way. Yeah. It's like this trick that, okay, it's got 15 grams of protein, but it's still highly processed, ultra-processed food, and it's just garbage. It's sweetened with some sort of weird chemical, and it's flavored with some sort of weird chemical, and it's, that's the thing that I think is probably my pet peeve is the idea that there's things that are really not food, but they're edible. They are edible. They won't kill you up front, but they are killing you. Yeah, yeah. That's where disease is coming from mostly in our society right now. Mostly, most heart disease, all of diabetes, basically, it's because of this,
And cancer will be, I heard a statistic that said obesity will be one of the biggest drivers of cancer by 2030.
Yeah. It is already for some cancers. I think probably breast cancer, colon cancer, it's number one. Yeah, I think it's going to be a driver of just about every, well, you can say healthcare cost going forward, and especially with the rise of childhood obesity. Maybe we should talk a bit about that, because both of us have had an experience with childhood obesity, and we're here, alive and well.
Yes.
And me, I'm a senior citizen now, and I'm doing better now than
I'm getting there.
in terms of my, my fitness and my weight, and that I'm doing better than I've ever done. But I'm also more aware that I'm at the age where I'm going to have diabetes. I really have. It's a definition now for me. Do I have diabetes or not? Depends how I eat and whether I exercise. Because when I put on a continuous glucose monitor, if I eat too much of the wrong kind of food, if I go to a food court and I eat the rice they give you, for instance, with the meal, or I go even for noodle soup at the Vietnamese restaurant, eat all those noodles, I'll have like blood sugar of 12 to 14. As far as I know, that means diabetes, right? It's just lurking, right?
It's scary.
So the stakes get higher when you start with obesity in your life. Then, for me, I have to be. I have a DEXA scanner at my clinic, and I recently had a DEXA scanner. I'm just over 16% body fat.
Wow.
And I wasn't like that.
That's great.
I was in my 20s when I was 16% body fat.
Yeah.
But I'm like a hair away from type 2 diabetes. So how skinny do I have to get now?
So you bring up such an important point, because I was at the Prix Gallienne in New York, and I was sitting on a panel called Beyond BMI, how BMI is not a correct reflection of someone's health, that we can't take this complex disease of obesity and sum it up into an equation. And so there's a company in the UK called Perspectrum, and they do something called cover scans. And this is a scan, an MRI, that's been calibrated to measure obesity in your body. And I said to them, I'm happy to talk about Beyond BMI, but if you want me to talk about the scan, I need one. So they sent me to Miami. I got the scan done. And it was, I had no idea how profound the experience would be getting my results, because I work hard at managing my obesity every single day. But you would never find me on the cover. I'm not a bikini model. So I always internalized that I was still yet a failure, because I still struggle with my weight. I still have ups, I have downs, I have better times, not so great times. And he sat me down, the cardiologist and who reviewed all of my scans, and he started with, you would make an excellent organ donor. He said, if I ever need an organ, I'm coming to you.
Oh, because your organs are perfect.
Yes, he was just like, the first thing he said is, we don't see any inflammation in your body. And my jaw dropped, right? Because we know how inflammation can really dramatically affect your mental health, your physical health. Now, I have to preface this. I am Southern Italian. When I did my genetic testing, I'm like 97% Southern Italian. So I do have very good genes. I'm the Sardinians of the world. My liver had 2% fat. He said, do you realize that athletes have like 0.5, 1%? And I made a joke. I said, forget about bikini shot on my Instagram. I'm putting my liver scan on Instagram. And he's like, you have the Kim Kardashian of livers. The heart, there's no inflammation, the artery, everything. And for me, it was such a motivator. I'm like, oh my God, I've been finally validated for the work. And then he said something nobody has ever said to me, because since I was 8 years old, people, lose weight, you got to lose weight, you got to lose some more weight, you got to lose weight. He said, Sandra, you don't need to lose weight.
Sure.
Like the earth stopped spinning for a minute. And I think this is so important, because we think there's only one ideal of what health looks like. So you are at a great BMI, and you've mentioned that you're struggling with maybe... I would have 100% had type 2 diabetes and probably not be alive right now had I not been such a health freak from the time I was, I basically got real sick as a teenager and lost a lot of weight. And then when I went back to school and I wasn't teased after that, and girls liked me and that sort of thing, it sort of started a spark. I mean, I was a geeky science sort of kid, and I started to study nutrition and health and started to really focus on my own health. And that's when I decided to be a doctor. But I think So that for me it was, my visceral fat is in total check. It's mostly subcutaneous fat. So
Yeah.
what does that mean? Maybe we need to accept that health comes at different sizes and different shapes, and not to make those snap judgments about people. Yeah.
The thing is, I hate to talk about myself as an example because I have to live in an extreme way to keep from having the natural course of things, because I have pretty bad start. I think I'm set up for diabetes also because I think my mom had gestational diabetes that wasn't treated. I have some tricky heart problems. And I also was born with a defective heart valve and an aortic aneurysm, and probably going to have my plumbing renewed at some point in the near future.
Wow.
But I've been able to stay it off for a long time, I think, because I've been so careful. But most people don't deal with that bad a start, and they end up having a lot of potential resilience where they could have a fair bit of extra weight if they ate a really good diet and they were physically fit, they really exercised.
Exactly.
It's the visceral fat, like you say, and the inflammation that's everything. And for me, even at my 16% body fat, in terms of my visceral fat, I still have an excessive amount of visceral fat.
Right.
There's we look at what we call the android to gynecoid ratio, where the DEXA scanner looks at how much fat's in your thighs and your butt, and the area that you call sort of where women carry it, the gynecoid fat distribution.
Exactly.
And then it shows you what's in your belly, what we call the android, where men tend to carry it in their belly. And if the ratio of that is over 1, then you have too much belly fat. And here me at BMI of 23 and 16% body fat, I still have a android to gynecoid ratio about 1.2.
Exactly.
So I don't. It's not. In a way, it's like you could say it's not fair, but it is what it is. Some people, if you started to gain weight as an adult, you might be able to carry quite a bit of weight, especially if you're a woman, and be completely healthy and be actually thriving. One of the things we know, if you go into your elderly years too thin, you're more likely to have frailty, which is really bad as an elderly person.
Yeah, exactly.
You'll have weak bones, you'll have not enough muscle, you'll lose functional capacity sooner, you'll probably end up with a fall. So there's definitely a lot of benefits to carrying a little extra weight into your later years for most people. For me, I'm going to have to get skinnier and skinnier, or I'm going to have to go on medication for diabetes at some point, I guess.
Well,
one of the two.
Interesting. So they found an incidental finding during my scan that I actually have a hole in my heart from childhood, and so the right side of my heart works twice as hard. It's enlarged, so I'm likely going to have surgery as well. We have so much in common.
Wow.
Yeah,
there we go.
yeah. So that was like a blessing that the scan. I would have never known. I would have just gone on with my life and maybe had a cardiac incident at a young age or heart failure. So I'm so grateful that I had nothing. I don't believe in coincidences. I think everything happens for a reason, and this was just a gift. Right time. Yeah.
But when you get a handle on food addiction, I probably had food addiction and a binge eating disorder, and that probably was the most damaging thing to my health that I carried. Even though I sort of got my weight down and I was very fit through my younger adult life, I still had regular times where I would just overeat to such an extreme. I could eat anybody under the table. I guess my stomach got used to being stretched. So, and I would, that would sort of plague me fairly regularly for many years. And, it's nice. I think as you get old, you can get some wisdom, and also having to teach this stuff and help people struggling with it. You learn lessons, and you don't want to be a hypocrite, right? You got to practice what you preach. So that's been helpful. It's good to have accountability, I think, for everyone.
I know. Whenever my clients give me good feedback, it's always like, no, you help me. You help me in ways you'll never understand. And I think it's really important also to just say that starting from a place of self-acceptance and self-love is often the first step, because it's very hard to change when motivated by shame, guilt, or self-hate, right? If you have that inner critic that's constantly putting you down, that will drain you of energy and motivation. So letting that voice go, dropping the bags of guilt and shame, you are where you are, and you're worthy. You're worthy to have and start today and love, and having the courage to look in the mirror and love what you see, even if it's not exactly what you want today. There's something still there to love. Yeah,
if you're raised to be a perfectionist, and even when perfect isn't perfect, That's the way I was raised, I think. Never
But then
was enough.
but you're human. So if the bar is perfection, you're going to fail every day.
Every
That means
time.
every
Yeah.
day you fail, which is a horrible way to live.
I've
Yeah.
learned to embrace good enough.
Good enough. Yeah, I love
Good
that.
enough
Yeah.
is good enough.
Yeah.
That's, there's no reason why not to try to strive for excellence in areas of your life. And, even you can say perfection. I'm glad that the airline pilot strives for perfection.
Of course.
If I go to a concert to hear a soloist, I want to hear pretty close to perfect.
Yeah.
I'll pick out every mistake. My wife's a violinist, so I have a good ear for, for that. So,
Yeah.
but for the most part in life, it's best to embrace good enough, because good enough is good enough. And, and pretty good is as good as it gets for most things.
Yeah.
And okay is okay too sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Learning to live a life of forgiveness, you forgive yourself and you forgive others, and get
'cause
forgiven yourself. That's
when
it's a good thing.
When you're at peace with yourself, I can be at peace with you. When I'm at peace with my shortcomings, when I make peace with all the mistakes I made, then I can be at peace with your mistakes, right? And I also too had that disease of wanting to be perfect. And I came from the corporate world and consulting world where it was only perfection, and you could maybe achieve it. And then I became a mother, and then I realized, right, the most important job of my entire life, and I mess up regularly. So what I try to teach my daughter is I will apologize, I will own, and I will clean up. That we can strive for. But it's interesting when you can achieve perfection maybe at school, maybe at work, but then you get into a romantic relationship or have a child, forget it. There's no perfection. And those are sometimes the most important relationships.
Well, I've been married to a girl I fell in love with in 1978. We're more in love now than we're like a couple of kids together now.
Aww, I love that.
So anyway, she had just turned 16 when we met.
Wow.
Didn't get married for a few years, but we've been married for 42 years now. And the thing that we've learned is it's not just forgiveness, it's grace. This idea that, you got to give people the space to just be a human being. And if they're having a grouchy day, don't be grouchy back. Try to be nice.
Yeah.
Give them more hug. Try to be, and if they're really prickly, you can give them some space and let them work it out. But be nice, don't lash back and if you get into a fight, bring it to a close as quick as possible, and the other person's probably right. For me, I'm usually wrong, so what the heck, just find humility. That's a big thing.
Yeah. And also when somebody has to be right and somebody has to be wrong, that means the person you love has to be wrong, has to be the loser, right? And that doesn't feel good. I'd rather have peace than be right. Who cares who's right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what does this have to do with food addiction? Well, it's everything, right? It's the heart of it. It's where, the roots of food addiction, it's a better choice than alcohol or drugs. It might be all of those things too. That's the problem, is it isn't always by itself. Addictions don't tend to be, you have your drug of choice, if you will. In this case, it might be food. But you also maybe have other things in your life too. And it's not necessarily the substance that's the problem at the root. It's other things like this. It's like living with a sense of guilt and shame. When it comes to weight, that's a big problem, is setting yourself up for failure by going on a strict diet, setting weight loss goals. You should try to set goals in a way where it's about the long haul, right? It's about the long haul, and thinking, what do I want my life to look like 5 years from now? Not necessarily 3 months from now. You're setting yourself up for failure. People tend to overestimate what they can do in a short amount of time and grossly underestimate what they can do if they just keep their mind on something and hang in there.
Yeah.
Like the tortoise and the hare. Tortoise and the hare.
And there's no more waiting. There's no need to wait to start living the life that you're going to love today. It doesn't matter what size you are. It doesn't matter how much you have to lose. It doesn't matter if you have a nice house. None of that matters. Start living the life that brings you joy, because when you start feeling joy, unconditional joy, so that does not the outer world that has to agree and behave so I feel joyful, but rather the joy that comes from within, that I can see it and feel it, then food doesn't seem as tantalizing because I'm experiencing it for myself, if that makes sense.
Oh,
right?
sure.
I'm not waiting.
Yeah.
I'm not waiting to start my life. Yeah.
I think people if they had a desire to pick up an instrument, let's say it's a violin.
Yeah.
And you're a grown up, that's maybe a little easier thing if you're 4 years old. But if you're a grown-up and you want to pick up a violin, get ready for something we call failure, right? Which means that you're going to make a lot of bad sounds for a long time until you have something that people are going to go, oh, that sounded nice.
Yeah.
And so the journey between picking up a violin and having something that you can play for someone else and they say, that sounds nice, and they mean it, that's a long journey. Mostly that's going to be failure, in a sense. You're going to fall down more than... And so the acceptance of failure and moving on anyway, being like the tortoise in the race rather than the hare, is the key to behavior change that's difficult. Yes. You have to say that's the bottom line, is you've got to be willing to fail at it. Every day you wake up, you sign a new contract saying, I'm going to do this or that today. And it might be a bad habit that you've been doing for 10 years or 20 years. You're still signing that contract today saying, I'm going to do it again today. You don't have to. Start the morning by saying, with a bit of resolve, saying, I'm going to see if I can avoid this thing, whether it's food or smoking or alcohol or whatever. Same thing applies. That today I'm going to give it another try. At the end of the day, don't feel like a total failure if you slipped a bit.
Yeah, well, I call it hitting bullseye. So every morning we wake up and we try to hit bullseye. But you define the bullseye, right? So my bullseye might be movement, meditation, and meal prepping. It's my 3 M's, right?
Sure,
and I pull back and I try to hit bullseye. And when I hit bullseye, it's great. Like, it feels fantastic. I go to bed feeling great. But what about the days I pull back and I miss bullseye? Like, I can't even find the arrow. I miss so badly. Well, those are the days that I practice self-compassion and self-love. So there's no more losing. For so many of us who've struggled with our weight or eating for years or decades like me, you start to internalize that I'm a failure. So in my programs, there's no more failing. There's either you hit bullseye and you enjoy it, or you miss it and you practice grace, forgiveness, self-love. You nurture yourself. So there's no more bad days, in essence. Yeah.
I think the other thing that has probably helped more people than anything else, myself is included, is learning how to cook. Things that taste really delicious, that are super good for you, that help you feel full without overeating. I actually went and studied to be a bit of a chef. Harvard Medical School puts on a program for doctors and dietitians to learn how to be chefs. It's called the Clinician Chef Program. So I'm a clinician chef coach through Harvard, and you actually go to the Culinary Institute of America for an intensive cooking school and that sort of thing. And then I started to really practice and cook meals for my family. And as time goes on, I started to realize I'm getting to be a pretty good cook. People actually like to eat what I make, including my grandchildren.
That's a big deal.
And that to me, if you can get to the point where you can cook a repertoire of really healthy food that's really delicious, doesn't take that many recipes, but master a few good recipes that hit the mark, you're going to be able to cheat the system here, because you're going to have foods that you love better than the skip the dishes. I can make better, I hate to say it, I can make better Mexican food and maybe even Indian food than the restaurants in town. Healthier, I can make the healthy version of what you get at those restaurants,
and feel good afterwards. Well, I don't know if you remember, but we were doing a Zoom together. It was one of the food addiction recovery Zooms, and I was doing my little spiel. There's no perfect diet. It doesn't exist. And you interrupted me. You said, Sandra, there's a perfect diet. And I was like, what? I got to hear this. What's the perfect diet? I was so suspenseful. And you said, learning to make food at home. We all have to do that. We all have to make our own food and understand what's going into the ingredients. And I loved that. That's actually the best answer.
And instead of skip the dishes, what we've learned is we invested in a good vacuum sealer.
Oh, okay.
Best investment, literally a commercial vacuum sealer.
Wow.
And it was the best investment I've ever made, because you have these really good vacuum seal. We've learned that when you make a meal that everybody loves, you make enough that you've got at least 3 or 4 meals you can freeze and then warm up later. It doesn't work for every dish, but it works for so many things.
So that's
and then
your
you save
fast
so much
food.
money.
Yeah.
Like we'll go to Costco once in a while, buy meat in bulk, and then I'll come home and I've another investment, a meat slicer, and we'll slice it up and cut it into cubes, and then we'll bag it up into different one meal portions, so that we can pull out something and have a stir fry, or pull out something and have like a souvlaki, or pull it out and make a stew or whatever. So easy. So you make it so that fast food is fast at home. when you don't have the time or you don't have the energy for a meal, you go to the freezer and you pull something out, and maybe you add some fresh stuff with it, maybe a salad with your stuff that you've frozen. That's been a huge game changer. Learning how to cook, and then batch prepping stuff so that your freezer's got, my freezer's sort of like a library. I've gotten so it's pretty organized, and with that vacuum sealer, you can make, when you finish vacuum sealing, you can push things down so they're flat, so they sort of sit in the, in the buckets like a library, like library books. And labeled nice.
You gotta post a picture of that. That sounds amazing.
Maybe we should pick up the discussion another time, because you have this program that you got an award for, and I'd like to hear more about that, and maybe you can share some of that with us. So I think we'll have to pick up this discussion another time. I think
I would love to.
We've gone on a lot of tangents, but we've we've done a lot together over the years. Our clinic has greatly appreciated the work you've done. How many people do you think you've reached in our clinic with your groups and programs?
I want to say about 1,500.
Probably,
because we do it 3 times a year. About 180 patients every round. Now, a lot of repeats, definitely. And a lot who have then joined my community and have been working with me for 5, 6, 7 years. And I always say repetition is the only form of permanence. My jokes are always the same, but they want to sign up again and again. And I think it's the community. Well, we should
maybe do something on this platform that's sort of like that, to maybe get people directed towards your community, because you do have resources to share, and you have a group-based program that you run that can really help people outside of people just referred to our clinic. They're like VIPs that get special. They get a special deal, but in any case, it should be available to more people. I think people ought to know more about what you do, because it is very unique. And there's, in the addiction world, there's a lot of addiction counselors, and they often are people who are successfully in recovery. That's their background. That's their starts. That's really often their credentials. They go and get training, but it's almost better that you've come from life experience, which you have. That's what we really appreciate. You share from your heart. You're an open book. I am, as you know, a bit like that. I think that's part of my job, is to be humble enough to tell people my story, because maybe it'll encourage someone else, and that makes it more important than me feeling a bit embarrassed of being vulnerable. But it is what it is, right?
And it makes doctors very relatable, because as patients, we think, you wear a white coat, you're the smart one, you're the accomplished one, you can't possibly know what I'm going through, because your life must be perfect, like you must have a handle on it. And so when you open your heart, you become so relatable, and it makes it easier for patients to reach out to doctors.
And I just think there's different kinds of success. I feel like if you're getting a bit better as the decades go by, that's success. I'm not perfect. I realized I just can't go that direction, but getting a bit better in many respects as you get older it's an achievable goal. Even if you start off with some weaknesses, or your start was a little bit rough, there's still hope, right? That's the big lesson here. And you don't necessarily have to have a bad habit to find an escape. There's a lot of healthy ways to do that. So I think we'll bring this to a close. Thank you so much,
and
Sandra.
I'll come back
it's been such a pleasure.
Yes.
All right, great.
Thank you.
All the best. Take care.
Thanks.